reason why everyone was so afraid of New Orleans. Of course, I know now that the real reason they're above ground is because New Orleans is basically sitting right on top of water. So if they were to do underground burials, the graves would become soggy and fill up with water, and the casket could float, like literally float up out of the ground. That's not good, and those things have actually happened before. Apparently, they went through a lot of trial and error in the past when it came to burials. They tried a couple of different methods in an effort to be able to bury everyone underground at first. They even tried using stones to weigh the caskets down to keep them from floating back up. Well, none of the methods seemed to work, so they pretty much just had to stick with above ground graves. I also read that sometimes tombs in the cemeteries are found open, with the graves being above ground. Grave robbers can easily just break in to see what they can find, and apparently after they're done, they just leave them open. That's crazy. Another interesting he was taking people's lives with their own axes or razors. I guess back then an axe was just one of those things that everyone had at their houses. So he was easily able to use the same type of weapon consistently almost every time. Anyway, after he would commit these heinous crimes, he would simply go. He would just put the axe down, leave it there, and he just left. Nothing much more than that. He didn't take anything from the houses, nothing. He did the same thing every time. So naturally, everyone was terrified after so many murders had happened in that area. Whoever was committing these crimes was still on the loose. You didn't know where they were gonna strike next. Then guess what happens? A letter written by the Axeman was published in the newspaper. This letter is actually rather interesting. In this letter, Axeman basically says that he is actually not a human being, but a demon spirit from the hottest hell. And he kind of makes fun of the police and their investigations, saying that both he and the devil are amused by it all. He says there's really nothing the police can do to stop him. He can do far worse than he's already done if he wants to. Then he goes on to say that at 12:15 the following Tuesday night, he would pass over New Orleans and everyone was to be playing jazz music. And anyone who was not playing jazz music would get the axe. So Tuesday night came. Everyone had jazz music playing. And until recently, it did not cross my mind that some people probably didn't own record players, or some people didn't have access to instruments to play jazz music themselves. So some people had to hire live jazz bands to play the music for them. People met at dance halls to play the jazz music. They did whatever they had to do to make sure that they were in a place that was playing jazz music that night. And guess what? No one at all got the axe that night. Can you imagine how terrified those people must have been? There's someone or something claiming to be so powerful that there's absolutely nothing anyone can do to stop him from doing whatever he chooses to do. Apparently, he ended up striking about 3 more times after that night. Then it all just stopped out of nowhere. The killer was never caught. It's like whoever it was just disappeared. He was never heard from again. When it comes to true crime, sometimes I have such a hard time processing the fact that this stuff actually happened. Like, in real life, this happened. This is one of those cases where I'm like, wow, that actually happened. I just can't imagine going through that. Okay, so you know how you see we drove by. I remember just being like, wow, I couldn't believe that that place was a Six Flags at any point. Now the poor thing is just sitting abandoned. It's like a little ghost town. Speaking of ghosts, I was wondering if there might have been any type of creepy activities going on there, because it just looks very creepy to me now. So you know me, I hopped on it and did a little research. Surprisingly, I didn't find too much creepy stuff about it, but people have said that when you're on the property, which I don't think anyone is actually supposed to be, they say you feel a presence there, like someone is watching you. Different banking sounds. What else did they say? Ghostly whispers. They're doing ASMR now. It was just a joke. No offense to anyone. But yeah, every so-called creepy thing that I found on Six Flags New Orleans, it all just sounds a bit cliche to me, I guess. I wasn't able to find any real reason as to why the property would be haunted or anything. I just knew I was gonna find something, but nope. I guess it's just the spooky appearance of the place that makes me feel like it should be very haunted in some way. Actually, if you know anything about Six Flags New Orleans and whether or not it's really haunted, fill me in, because I just want to know. Thank you. We can't make a creepy video about New Orleans without mentioning the most haunted house in New Orleans, the infamous Lollery Mansion. And a former occupant of this mansion, Madame Delphine Lollery. I'm sure you're probably familiar with this story also. So my first time hearing about her or this mansion was while I was watching American Horror Stories. If I'm not mistaken, I think the season was Coven, the one with the witches. One of the best seasons, if you ask me. If you know, you know. But anywho, so Madame Delphine Lollery was a very wealthy New Orleans socialite, right? That would be Thunder. She and her third husband moved into a mansion on Royal Street. This was back in the early 1800s. It was a two-story mansion that also had slave quarters attached. Apparently, she used to have these grand parties all the time at the mansion. People noticed that she had many enslaved African people. I heard that you would never really see the same one twice. Rumors eventually started to spread that Madame Lollery was treating the people she enslaved very badly. I read that between 1830 and a few years after that, there were 12 documented slave deaths at the Lollery Mansion. None of the causes of death was ever made public. That kind of makes you wonder, right? Lord knows how many were never documented at all. Neighbors also claimed to have witnessed some of this mistreatment with their own eyes. In one incident, neighbors claimed that a little girl, who was enslaved at the Lollery Mansion, of course, fell to her death from the roof of the mansion while she was running away from Madame Lollery, who was coming after her with a whip. All because the little girl allegedly hit a snag actually set the fire in an attempt to take her own life to avoid further punishment from Madame Lalaurie. This poor lady did live though, and when firefighters and police arrived, she told them that she was scared of being taken to the uppermost room. She said whoever was taken up there never came back. So of course they attempted to go into the uppermost room. The door was locked and the Lalaurie family refused to give up the key. So the door was broken down instead. Inside they found 7 enslaved people who were all in horrible condition. I don't really know if I'm allowed to give all of the details on here. I'll have to do some research on that, but they were seriously mutilated, chained up with spiked iron collars, starved, limbs barely attached. They were just in really bad shape. This place was a torture chamber. It was obvious that they had been tortured regularly, and after discovering these people and the condition that they were in, people were outraged. On top of that, bodies of adults and children were found buried in the yard of the mansion. And what happened to Madame Lalaurie after these gruesome discoveries? She fled to Paris and was never seen again. So no real justice was ever served. Sources say that Madame Lalaurie passed away on December 10th, 1849 at the age of 62. No one seems to know exactly what happened to her though. As far as the mansion goes, the original mansion was burned down by an angry mob after the discovery of the mutilated slaves. It was rebuilt a few years later though, and this is the same building you can find at 1140 Royal Street today. Over the years, the mansion has been put to use in several different ways. It's been used as an apartment building, a public high school. At one point, Nicolas Cage even bought the mansion. That man just loves New Orleans, I see. But it ended up going into foreclosure and it was auctioned off. Now back to the creepy stuff. Considering all of the gruesome things that happened at this location, you can only expect the place to be haunted, right? Well, apparently, paranormal activity has been reported for almost 200 years now. Although most people believe that the place is haunted by the many people that were enslaved by Madame Lalaurie, which could very well be true. Another tragic incident actually happened at the mansion as well. While the mansion was being used as an apartment building, a tenant was brutally murdered in his room. That could play a part as well, along with who knows what. Apparently, the place is so haunted that the American Horror Stories crew didn't even want to film there. I wouldn't either. I have yet to see this mansion in real life. I was actually supposed to go on the ghost tour the last time I was in New Orleans, but we couldn't find the freaking meeting spot for the tour. So by the time we finally found it, one of the street entertainers told us that the tour had already started and everyone had already left. So I didn't get a chance to see the mansion. I don't think you can go inside, but I still want to go to just see where all of this stuff actually happened. The last little thing that I want to talk about really creeps me out a bit. I'm going to try to explain this in such a way that I don't situation